Welcome, food travelers, to an episode here in Kansas City. In this episode, we head to Chef J BBQ for lunch, and they are ranked number 1 on the Kansas City Barbecue magazine in October 2023. Was also mentioned in the Texas Monthly Barbecue. And coming here, we had a pretty high hopes for it. We went there on the one on the 13th and Hickory Street, and I was reading online about how they were opening a second location in the North Kansas City area. However, at the time of this recording, when we were searching for the restaurant on Google Maps, this was the only one that popped up for us. And a little bit of information about the operation hours. They are open Thursdays to Saturday from 11:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. or sold out. Sundays from noon to 4 p.m. or sold out.
Yeah, Micah, something interesting about the place. It's located, looks like Old Town Kansas City. And so you definitely have all these older buildings with even some signs. So walking around the neighborhood was really interesting, Micah. Really a lot of brick buildings, and you can tell it's been, it has that history in it. So it was quite interesting to walk around and see everything there. I actually like that part about it. It's a little bit, I don't want to say dead, but there's like a lot of empty buildings still. At least that's what it seemed like to me. But it was interesting that they put the spot here and there was people coming over to eat.
Yeah, when we were walking around, like Simon said, it definitely felt like it was a little bit more empty. But I'm not sure if it's also because of the time that we went that it felt that way. When we initially got there weren't any lines. And as the time got closer to opening, the lines began to form. And we weren't really sure how busy it was going to be compared to our experience in Texas, so we did show up a bit earlier. We also wanted to take a look at their pits, and we did find one outside the end of the block. Unfortunately, they weren't very welcoming, and looking at it, it's quite different from the experience that we had when we were in Texas.
Yeah, definitely different. The tank for the barbecue pit is definitely something similar to what we see in Texas, and so we maybe were a little spoiled going to Texas barbecue, because with most of the Texas barbecue places, they're always really happy for you to come talk to them and see all the different things that they do. And in this case, it wasn't quite that same feeling. So it's unlucky, I guess you can say, but at the same time, it is also the owner's discretion of how they want to run their business, and maybe there's just some things that they prefer people not, be around. Especially it's food. It has its little intricacies that people need to do and follow.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I did find interesting is when we got there at the line, they did have a sign that said the smoked turkey was already sold out. So I'm not sure if that was from online orders or people placing it in advance, but that was something interesting that I thought, because in our experience going to a lot of barbecue restaurants, it's not often that we find smoked turkey being the one that is sold out at the beginning of the restaurant opening.
Yeah, especially with all the things that we've been reading, Micah, about the place. And originally, at least in my mind, I was expecting there to be like a huge line even prior to opening, but there was no line. It did eventually create one at later in the day, probably about, I'd say 20-30 minutes after the doors were open. But it just, from what we expected to what actually happened, it wasn't quite exactly what we thought it would be.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised about that too, about how the line didn't really form until much later. I would expect more people would line up at the beginning. Maybe they're all locals and they know how it works, and we're just not, I guess, informed about that.
So what we ended up getting was kind of a mismatch of things. What's it, 3 meats, Micah, that we got, combination plate?
We actually went with the 4 meat plate, quarter pound each. So we got the brisket, burnt ends, pork ribs, pulled pork, and for the sides, we got the bacon and blue potato salad, and also the smoked elotes, which is the cheesy corn. And for dessert, we got the Chef J banana pudding.
One of the things I was really excited about, especially reading about Kansas City barbecue, was these burnt ends, Micah. Actually, I did like these ones. It's not quite. It's kind of an odd thing because it's burnt ends, but in this case, they call it burnt ends, but it was more like a pork belly. And so in my mind, I was thinking of kind of a brisket burnt ends, but it actually wasn't. It was very nice though, but compared to the pork belly that's offered at Interstellar in Austin, Interstellar has really great pork belly, although this one does hold up on its own.
Yeah, the burnt ends was good. Not quite the same experience we've had over in Texas, like Simon said. In the brisket, I feel like it's maybe closer to how Salt Lake has it or some other places, because definitely not as juicy as what we've been accustomed to in Texas barbecue.
Yeah, there was something that just wasn't what you kind of desire, especially after eating Texas barbecue brisket. I wouldn't say like Salt Lake, because the cooking style is a little different. It's over the heat on a barbecue grill, whereas this style and most Texas barbecue style, it's low and slow. And so in this one, you kind of expect it to be a little bit more tender than it was, but there was some dryness. You can kind of feel some of the meat kernel pieces, like that's what I call it. Like after it gets kind of dried out a bit, you can kind of have these little morsels of harder pieces of meat, and so you kind of feel like this pebbly kind of a texture to it.
Yeah, and moving with the sauces, I thought the sauces was kind of interesting. They had some nice sauce where one was sweet, one was a little bit more, I guess, sour, and one was more spicy. But even the spicy one, I didn't feel like it was too over the top spicy.
And then kind of wanted to make a comment about the ribs, because I remember eating it, and to me it was a bit on the salty side. It was I could take a few bites and then I'd have to pause and kind of go through something else and not go through it, but it was salty more than I thought it should have been. The saltiest ribs I've ever had was actually over at in Las Vegas. We went to Reds in Las Vegas, and that one was salty to the point where I couldn't even eat it. I just left it as it was because it was just unedible. And this one, it wasn't quite to that level, but it was definitely salty, because if I could not eat 2 ribs straight back to back. If I did, I would have to be drinking like a gallon of water, and so that was unfortunate.
But I think in terms of the how the ribs were cooked, they still had a nice bite to it in terms of how it was. It wasn't just like straight fall off the bone with the moment you pick it up. I think that part of it was done pretty well.
Yeah, I think the technique for the ribs were really nice, and from what we get from Kansas City barbecue, it's a lot about the sauce as well. And so I tried to actually put some sauce on to try to maybe dilute some of that saltiness, but I just found like it just didn't do it enough, or maybe I had to drench the sauce onto the ribs, but whatever I tried, it just didn't quite work, and maybe it was just that day that was off.
Yeah, it could be, but overall, I think this one was an interesting experience coming to Kansas City. So if you're looking for something different and you're in the area, you could try this one and see how your experience is. And to wrap up the episode are the notables. Unfortunately for this one, there are none.
If you've enjoyed the content you've seen, don't forget to support the channel and hit like and subscribe. And if you want to see additional pictures of food and our travels, go over to our Instagram page and follow us there. And thanks for watching.